You are listening to the Quite Useless podcast.
We are now joined by Wendy Woolfson, a storyteller, counsellor and facilitator of Out of Harm, which is a new multidisciplinary art project being shown in Glasgow this week that mixes film and photography and storytelling to share young people's experiences of self-harm. Hello, Wendy.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you for having me.
When me and Erin were talking about sort of you coming on the podcast and stuff, Erin shared a very interesting fact about the name Wendy. Would you like to? You probably know it, seeing as it's your name.
Yeah.
It was made for Peter Pan, the story. That's what it was made for. It wasn't a name before Peter Pan.
Yeah.
That was my fact.
Indeed. Apparently the name comes from J.M. Barrie. Had a wee friend, I forget her name, 6-year-old girl, and she used to call him her Fwendy.
Yeah.
You're my Fwendy. And he took the name Wendy from that. So the story goes.
Okay.
Oh, that's cute.
I've looked it up on Wikipedia before this interview, and yeah, that's the case. I also found out that the name Gary was first used by Gary Cooper.
Oh, right.
It wasn't his name, he was Paul Cooper or something,
right.
And he adopted Gary Cooper because his agent lived in Gary, Indiana. That was the first time it was used as a given name.
Oh, how interesting. Didn't know that.
Yeah,
right.
Did you think of Gary? Like, there's always been Garys.
Yeah.
Names are weird though.
Yeah,
So
you should check out your own names. Do you know the origins of your...
my name means Ireland. So
Does it?
Yeah,
Ireland.
it just means Ireland.
Ah, right.
And you've got a really interesting middle name.
Yes, Hepzibah.
Hepzibah
Or Hefzibah.
Right. Where does that come from?
It's Hebrew and it means my delight is in her.
Oh wow, that's beautiful.
It's a character in the Bible, isn't it? It's a woman.
Yeah, it's in the Bible. Yeah. So
I'm also in the Bible.
Thank you.
I feature quite heavily as a river, and my name actually means flowing down in Hebrew, which of course makes sense.
Right.
Wow.
But we're not here to talk about names. We're here to talk about Out of Harm, which is a new project that you've been developing over the past few weeks. So how would you describe the project?
The project is about exploring self-harm. So the purpose of it was to provide a space and an opportunity for people to share their own experiences around self-harm, whatever shape or form that took. Not necessarily for people who have self-harmed or are currently self-harming, but maybe they know somebody who's self-harmed. So there's two strands to the project. One is providing that therapeutic space for people to explore the stories of self-harm, and the other is to develop a toolkit to provide an accessible and appropriate language for adults, either professional or just families, who come into contact with young people who may disclose self-harm to them and they don't know what to say. So these are the two main strands.
Obviously self-harm is such a big challenging subject. Why did you decide that this was something important to do a project about?
One of my roles is working as a counsellor with Childline on the helplines, and just about every second contact that you have, if not more, the coping mechanism with so many young people is to self-harm, and it comes in many different shapes and forms, self-harm. And I was really shocked. I've been working there for almost a year now, and I was really shocked to discover that self-harming was so prevalent. I work as a therapeutic storyteller, and I started to put two and two together, but the main trigger for me was actually talking to a GP back in April, and he found out I worked at Childline. He said, "What do you do when young people disclose about self-harm? How do you deal with that? Because I don't know what to do." And I, again, shocked, because this is a GP who also works in safeguarding in his community. And he's asking me, how do I cope when a young person discloses self-harm? And I thought, this is just quite unbelievable. And I started to look into it further, and when you hear I started really listening even more closely to the young people when they were contacting the helpline. And one of the things that we might do is say, like, go to your GP. Have you thought about talking to your GP? Is there a teacher that you trust? A member of your family that you feel you can talk to about this? And the answer is always no. Because they're scared that the adult won't know how to respond to them. There's a lot of shame and guilt and fear, and these people become desperately isolated and alone. And I just thought there's a link missing here, and the link is the language. And what we need to do is develop an accessible language, not a counselling language, but something simple and guidelines that are really clear and easy to follow for any adult, whether a professional or, like I said, just a family member or a friend, so that they would know how to respond when somebody tells them that they're self-harming.
It does seem to be something that has a really disproportionate stigma around it. Obviously, there's a lot of stigma surrounding, mental health, which, and as we're recording this, it's World's Mental Health Awareness Week. But I remember I started self-harming when I was 13, and I remember going to the doctors for the first time, and they were entirely unequipped to deal with it, and it really felt like throughout, and I subsequently went to counselling sessions and stuff, and it really felt like a sort of big elephant in the room that you were afraid to talk about. You could be open about depression, about anxiety, about things like that, but self-harm is the big thing that you're afraid to mention. So it sounds like really useful if there's some kind of way that you can break that down. And
it's interesting because it's really very simple. It really is. I think it's very simple. You need to take the power out of it. The young person says, I'm self-harming. You acknowledge it, and it's okay. Thank you for telling me that. But let's look at what's happened.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's not focus on the self-harm in whatever shape that has taken. You've told me. I'm holding it for you. Thank you. Now, what's happened? And then that's it. That's it. There's no need to do things like inappropriate stuff, like being shocked, horrified is often a response. Asking to see it, it's quite grim, the things that people think it's okay to do. But it just comes out of ignorance, and it's because self-harm, like I said, is such the people who self-harm feel it's so shameful. It's really hard to share that, and it becomes, like you said, this massive elephant in the room. And what it needs is for an adult to just be able to acknowledge it and very gently hold that space and allow that person to talk about whatever it is that's brought them to that.
I think that's quite important about focusing on self-harm as a symptom rather than something so big in itself. I can kind of understand why there is that kind of stigma about it, because if you're not someone who self-harms, I can see why you would find it such an alien thing. That it's so shocking that you would want to harm yourself because obviously we're, as animals, supposed to be interested in our own survival and well-being and things, and it seems so counter to that, so alien to want to hurt yourself.
You actually see it in animals as well. Animals who are caged and separated from parents and things like that, they actually start turning to self-harm. People have talked about self-harm as being a form of control. It's about having autonomy over yourself, in actual fact. Autonomy over what's happening in your life that may feel out of control. And it is. It's really hard for anyone who hasn't experienced self-harm. It's very hard for them to understand what that can be like. How somebody can be so far removed from themselves, so disassociated, that to harm themselves feels like the only thing they can do. That's a hard thing for somebody to understand. But do you know what? They don't need to understand that. They just need to be able to hold the space, to listen, and allow that person a place to talk and to know how to direct them to better services or some kind of support.
So how then have you been working with the young people that you have been working with to sort of break into this subject?
Well, running a project like this has to be organised very, very carefully, and Confab have the organisation who's supported this project have been very careful about contacting the right kinds of groups in the community to find some young people who would be interested and voluntarily want to explore this subject. So it's about sending out clear information to different organisations and allowing the young people to make a decision themselves whether they want to be a part of it. And so we were lucky and we found a group, and it wasn't easy to find a group because, well, it's a huge thing to ask of anybody to come to a group of people that you don't know, and you're going to talk about something that you find shameful and feel guilty of, and you know that people find really hard to hear, all that stuff. So we were lucky to find this group, and within the group, the first thing you have to do is create a safe space, and there's a lot of work done around that, creating a place that's comfortable where the group decide how this is going to work for them to make them feel safe enough. And I think it's also about being very open and clear about it and saying from the start, we're going to talk about self-harm, but you don't have to talk about anything you don't want to talk about. If you don't want to say anything, you don't have to say anything. And it's just allowing people to say whatever they feel they want, whilst keeping themselves safe. And that's about, again, that's the work around creating a safe space. So it's helping people to understand, I would say quite openly to them, like, your triggers. So when we're talking, make sure that you keep yourself safe by not talking about things that are going to be triggering for you, because we don't want people to leave the group feeling awful. We want the opposite. I'm very experienced in doing that and in creating these kinds of safe spaces, and the feedback from the group has been phenomenal. They've really loved it, and they've got a sense of empathy from each other. None of them have ever talked about their self-harm with somebody of a similar age before. They found that really helpful. It's been a very privileged experience for me to be able to sit in the room and hold that space and allow them to tell their stories and give that time to them. It's been pretty amazing. I think they've been very courageous to do it.
I imagine it must be a sort of remarkable experience because self-harm is something that, as you said, can be so isolating. And to be able to connect with other people through art, it must be a really valuable experience. Yeah. You said that you sort of bring in folk tales in the work. How did you sort of intertwine that with the theme of self-harm?
So we entered upon this as the hero's journey. So looking at the hero's tale, I brought stories of resilience and hope and courage, and I would tell a story and then just allow some space to reflect on the themes in that story. And so the group just started to talk about how they felt, what did that story mean to them, did it resonate in any way, and you just open up discussions around it.
How long did you spend working with the group ahead of the performance?
We've had 7 sessions. It was meant to be 8, but we couldn't manage the 8th one, unfortunately. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to meet again after the events. We'll meet again to have a kind of debrief in a couple of weeks' time, and just see how the group are. I know that they're really sad to be leaving and that they want the work to continue. So I think having a debriefing session will be really good. And part of the work with the group as well has been about asking them what they think around the subject of language, what they think would have been helpful for somebody to ask them, or a type of approach, things that weren't helpful, what they would like to see happen, what would the toolkit look like for them. And that's because the toolkit's not developed yet, that's in the process just now. So the purpose of the workshops as well is to help develop that toolkit.
So what will the process look like, post the events that you're having this week? How will the toolkit continue to develop?
Well, I'm working with an artist, Josie Vallely, and she's been doing a lot of research on self-harm and pulling tons of information together. And we've had meetings with different organisations to get their feedback, and we'll be continuing with that process. Basically, we meet up and we talk about the language, and we look at what the toolkit's going to look like, because it's going to be something that's compact that you could keep in your wallet or your purse. Okay. Something small, kind of fold out credit card sized thing that will be long, and just what are the questions and statements that we can put on there, so that it's just mapped out. It's the words that need to come out of your mouth when somebody says, I'm self-harming, I don't know what to do. And, bingo, there's the words just come out because you've got them there, and it's entirely appropriate to open up the toolkit and say, right, and to read it, because those words are going to be the right words. The toolkit, though, will also contain information for the young person about what they might want to say, how to disclose. Yeah,
of course, it's something that's very hard to bring up.
Yeah, what that might feel like, where they might want to do it, to think about that, not just blurting it out in front of somebody, but being a bit more prepared before you do it.
I think that's really, really good. Like, I had a friend who self-harmed, and then she told me, but we were pretty young at the time, probably 14, so you didn't know how to deal with it, and I didn't really know how to help her, but I did what I could to help her, and she would phone me if she needed me and stuff like that. But even in school, when they would talk about it in classes like PSE and stuff like that, they don't really tell you anything. They just kind of skim over it and then move on. So I think what you're doing is helpful, really helpful.
I found that in my PSE classes, obviously I was in school, a few years behind you, but I didn't get anything about self-harm. Self-harm wasn't mentioned.
They kind of just briefly, they just say it harms. They don't really give you any kind of how to deal with it if you are the harmer, or if you have a friend who's doing it or anything like that. They don't really help you.
So the final, I think I've said performances before, I don't know quite how to describe the events that you're having this week. What are they going to look like? Yeah,
I would describe them more as sharings. Okay. More of a sharing, gathering kind of thing. I feel it's very important that just for our group, and maybe, just for our group, the feel that I've got is that it's not a performance. It's about sharing the experience of what we've done in the group, what that's been like, and they're just being so courageous. So we're going to have poetry, we're going to have stories, we might have an audience interactive thing. We'll see. We'll see how people feel as well, because it's their event, so it's up to them what they want to do. With storytelling, it's very much the way I work as well. It's very improvised, and it's led by the participants, and I think it's really important, even up to the last minute, that people are allowed the option to opt in, opt out, to change their minds, and I'm there to support that. So if somebody decides that they can't read their story out or tell their story, I'm happy to do that for them if that's what they want. But certainly I'll be talking about the project, what we've been doing, and what our hopes are for the future.
And what are you hoping that the audience takes away from these events?
A bit more awareness of self-harm. That experience of having met people who've self-harmed and they're still here, and they're just like you and me. It's it's not as scary as you might think when somebody tells you that they're self-harming, and it is actually something that you can cope with when somebody discloses that to you, and to have some fun. And we've had a lot of fun, and it sounds perverse, but we've had a lot of fun in our group, a lot of laughter, a lot of good times. It's not all doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very important.
Yeah, that sort of brings people together, doesn't it? And
Mm-hmm.
increases sort of supportive atmosphere.
You can have fun even around something as awful as self-harm.
Yeah.
It's perverse, but it's true.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it. So the events are on at the Glad Cafe on Wednesday the 26th of October. It's in Shawlands from 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock. And then on the Thursday the 27th of October at Stereo in Glasgow City Centre. And tickets are free. You can book them by emailing Rachel at admin@confab.org.uk.
And you can find our Facebook page as well.
Okay.
It's called Out of Harm.
We'll put these details in the description of the episode as well. Thank you for coming in to talk to us.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing this interview, and I'm sorry I'm not very vocal. I just absorbing everything you're saying.
Yeah.
And he knows how to word questions better than I do.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Well, thank you for doing the project as well, especially as someone who has self-harmed in the past. It sounds like such a valuable thing, and I hope that it does make some kind of substantial difference to...
Well, my hopes for the future for this are that we'll get to do more of these workshops. Funding from somewhere, please. More of these workshops, more people being given the opportunity to share their stories and have that experience, and try and roll this toolkit out further afield, as far afield as we can go.
Well, hopefully these events will help to sort of spread the word a bit.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking to us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.